Welcome to today's meeting of the Health and Social Care Select Committee at London Borough of Hillingdon. This meeting is being broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel Hillingdon London. The purpose of this committee is to monitor services provided by health partners and adult social care and review their performance. We also undertake in-depth reviews and witness sessions on specific topics and submit our findings to the decision-making cabinet. My name is Councillor Nick Denys and I'm chair of the committee. Before we start, I have some important housekeeping for everyone present. Please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers out of the building. Please keep your microphone muted when you aren't speaking and then unmute to speak. As chair, I'll call on those to speak during the meeting. It's also worth noting that some councillors on this committee may be using devices and also some of the witnesses to access their agenda and papers in the meeting. So I'm now going to move on to the agenda. Nikki, do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest before this meeting? No? Good stuff. We have the minutes of the meeting from the 22nd of July. Does anyone have any comments on the accuracy of the minutes, or are we happy to approve them? Fantastic, agreed. Item 4, exclusion of press and public. Everything we're discussing tonight is in public, is that correct? Fantastic. Okay, that was good for the first 4 items. Let's hope the rest of the meeting goes the same way. Anyway, okay, right. We're on to item number 5, which is the future of the minor injuries unit. So we have Leslie Watts here, Chief Executive of the Hillingdon Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, and Dr. Alan McGlennan, Chief Medical Officer and Managing Director of the Hillingdon Hospital Trust. So I'll pass it over to you, Leslie and Alan, to present as you wish.
Thank you very much, and evening, everybody. So I'll start, and Alan will probably correct me, but I'll do my best. So we've discussed here previously about the future of the minor injuries unit and our proposal. And excuse me. And just to remind everyone, just to put a little bit of context around why we even thought about the future of the minor injury unit, which is so, as everybody around this table knows, that health in Hillingdon, particularly around the acute trust, has had and continues to have actually a history of overspending, so not living within its means. The performance overall, in terms of the emergency department performance, has not been where it needs to be, so it hasn't been looking after our sick kids in a way that we would want it to be. And we have work to do around elective recovery. And we need to do that in the context of looking after our staff the best that we can, and making sure that that we attract the best staff to Hillingdon and develop those staff in Hillingdon. And we need to do that within the resources that we're allocated. And behind all of that, of course, is your desire and the population's desire to build the new hospital on the Hillingdon site, which we're one of just a very few places that have got the permissions to do that. We won't go into that tonight. So we brought that suggestion here. We started to talk about the process, which would be that we would take the options to our board, which you will see that we did in July, that we would engage with our colleagues here and with our colleagues around the health services around Hillingdon, but also in Hertfordshire, in Berkshire, with the national and with the London teams and with our integrated care board. We've met with many of the residents' associations as we were asked to do. We had a meeting on Friday, actually, where all of the local MPs came to, a number of local councillors from here came as well, to explain again the rationale for our suggestion. Where we are now is the decision was taken by the board that we should transfer the work from the minor injury unit to Hillingdon. We're in the midst of the consultation with staff at the moment, and you will also have seen that there was an adjournment debate as well on the subject. So that's what we've done in terms of process. Is there anything you want to catch up on in terms of the overall context?
Context of the clinical context?
Yeah, you might want to say something about the clinical context.
So just to give a bit of detail about the patients that we see about 35 to 40 patients at the minor injuries unit currently. We see between 400 and 450 patients of all stripes in the ED at Hillingdon Hospital. About 200 of them are through the urgent treatment centre. And so the proposal that has been accepted by our board is to move the service so that up to 35 to 45 patients move across to Hillingdon Hospital to be seen there. And the reason that we engage with Berkshire and with Hertfordshire is the data that we reviewed of our recent performance. Many patients come from outside of the borough, albeit they are very local neighbours to us, as we well know if we live in the north of the borough. And also the type of work that we have been doing there is not always minor injuries. Sometimes it's minor illness, coughs, colds, urine infections, and sometimes it's wound management. So things that should properly be done in primary care, social care, even pharmacy care. And so the partner piece to this that we brought along to the meeting with the MPs and the council representatives and the residents associations was quite what Hillingdon Care Partners are viewing the whole entirety of same-day care or urgent care. So we feel that with the 10-year plan that the government has put through, it's very much in step with Hillingdon Care Partners' plan for the integrated care hubs, one of which in the north of the borough is established and growing. So we felt that that is very much the right time to make that move. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to say actually that when the neighbourhood teams actually came to talk about that hub, that actually was really well received by local residents, which is a really positive thing, which is putting care in the right place, provided by the right people, and the acute unit concentrates on looking after the population that it needs to serve. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that. I've got one question which might turn into two questions, and I'll open up to other councillors. I was going to ask about how this fits into the sort of NHS 10-year plan that was on bullet point number 2, about sort of shifting care closer to the communities, because I imagine those in north of the borough would not necessarily see this as shifting care closer to the communities. Now, obviously, in terms of the hospital itself, the rebuild of the hospital, and also having more patients treated in the community and the idea of the hubs, which is something that we've looked at a lot, those are all very positive ideas, but that's an idea that's developing for the future. Closing the minor injury unit is something for now. I mean, do you have any idea how many people who are currently being seen at the minor injury unit in Mount Vernon would actually be going to other local provision right now? Because going to Hillingdon might not feel like a geographical massive distance, but actually it's a very different experience going to Hillingdon Hospital. So, if it was shut tomorrow, the minor injury unit in Mount Vernon, do you know what percentage would actually be able to be dealt with locally? Yeah,
so I can give a first stab at that. The ones who really need to go to a secondary care hospital, whether that's Mount Vernon or whether that's Hillingdon, are those that really require an X-ray, and it's about 50% of the workload. So I would anticipate that 50% of the people that are going there today would have to make that journey. And I live very much near Mount Vernon, so I do know the journey quite well. And for some people it isn't easy. You've got to remember that people that are going there are not the fractured hips, they're the fractured fingers, they're the twisted ankles, okay? So they are by and large going under some kind of transport. They're not walking out. We are maintaining the shuttle bus that is between them, but I'm not coming here and telling you it's better. Those 20 patients would be having a different journey. I would expect that what should happen to the other 20 patients are either they would be using their minor injuries units or their care units closer to where they are, so some in Hemel Hempstead and obviously down in Northwick Park, but the rest would be on the same day urgent care that's provided by general practice. To remind everybody, the reason that patients get to go to Mount Vernon, they will have to have called 111 in the first place, and there is a selection for the call operator, and they choose Mount Vernon. It's not that's the only choice, and there is a narrative that I understand people saying that the access to general practice is not what it once was, and I'm not here to defend them, but it's not actually as close as people maintain. There is same-day urgent care through primary care, and it's quite good in Hillingdon. I say that because my wife is doing one of the shifts in this building as we speak, and she'd tell me off if I didn't say that. But also, just to remind everybody, if you go to the minor injuries unit, you'll probably have been given an appointment from the day before. You'll have called up on one day, been given an appointment the next day. So it's not the same. It moves in the direction of the 10-year plan. It does mean that Hillingdon concentrates what it does well, minor injuries that have a musculoskeletal part to it, and also so we can concentrate more on the major injuries that we have.
So is the capacity there now for that? So obviously that works very well if the capacity is there, but if somebody who lives in Northwood with a minor injury rings up who would have gone to Mount Vernon, and the person on 111 says, oh yes, you could have gone to this centre near you, but actually because we're full, you're going to have to go to Hillingdon Hospital. So are you confident that actually the capacity is there to take those patients who would have gone to Mount Vernon and can be dealt with locally?
I am. So most of my job is looking at the performance of the various parts of the unit. The minor injuries unit and the urgent treatment centre, part of our emergency department, we see patients, treat and then discharge within 4 hours, 98% of the time, from the Hillingdon unit. Okay, so we already do that. There is capacity to do more, and of course we're moving the staff with them, and there is the physical capacity in that area.
Just to add to that, sorry, which is, and I pay tribute to Alan and the rest of the team at Hillingdon. If you have a look at the performance overall, so we have really driven up the overall performance. I think if it's not the best in London, it's one of the best in London now, and that's something that we've really concentrated on, knowing that actually there would be questions, absolutely legitimate questions in how we treat everybody. But it is about moving those staff who are expert in the care of these patients and saying, actually we need to look after more patients than this. We need to have that service offered to all of the patients for Hillingdon.
Thank you. I'll go to other councillors now. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Up until this week, you mentioned it was a suggestion to close Mount Vernon service. This is despite Hillingdon Hospital service has been under probably enormous pressure. I was trying to find the waiting times this afternoon, but the service was down, which tells you that. But I would imagine it was in hours. It's also despite, I would imagine the Mount Vernon Centre is fully booked on a daily basis. It's despite, we've got a report here that Hillingdon has more residents per GP than any other London borough. It's despite 2 of our wards in Hillingdon having no GP services, no GP service in Heathrow villages. A few months ago we had the Pharmacies Federation in telling us that the pressures from the additional services that were announced with the last government were putting pressure on pharmacies. Public opinion is clearly against the closure for various reasons. I've read the report. I can't find, other than obviously yourselves, any positive feedback that suggests that people agree with closing this service. You presented 3 options. It feels a little bit like option 1 and option 2 were never a starter. It was always going to be option 3 that was the goal all along. Was it the goal all along? And just a little question on the end there. There's David Simmons and the team of councillors and MPs he was with got a slight concession that if the pressure on the other services is too high, that they would reverse the decision of the closure. What metric are you looking at would be deemed too high? If, for example, it's 6 hours wait in A&E, is 7 the too high? That kind of. So what metric are you looking for? Thank you.
You can start, thanks, Amy.
Okay, really good questions. There's quite a lot in there. If I don't get them all, please remind me. You were asking about performance. I would like to separate out minor injuries and urgent treatment centre performance and major performance ED performance, because that's what Mount Vernon provides. Currently today we've been running at 90 minutes for most of the day, and it comes in peaks and troughs. The deficit of healthcare throughout the whole of Hillingdon, we're not responsible for, but we respond to. And as you said, Heathrow villages are one of the affected areas. There is no question that there is a greater health deficit in the south of the borough. And some of that does spill over into our services. Not necessarily the urgent treatment centre, the minor injuries unit, to be honest, more on the ED side of things. In regards to concession, it's not really a concession. Every single time we make a major change to our services, we review them anyway. We don't do them for any other reason other than to attack a problem that we've got. And the problem that we've got in our services is we don't live within a means for what we get paid for urgent care, and it does tack to that. It does save money. We do not have resilient performance, mainly in our ED, the major side of it, because there's so much work to be done, to be spread around, and the amount of work that's done in Mount Vernon is much less than is done in the other side, so it rebalances that. And also it rebalances the sort of the workforce gaps that we've got. To maintain our services that we have to have a lot of bank and agency staff, so those are extra staff, because we can't attract staff to be permanent, but we've got permanent staff in another part of the system that we're trying to rebalance. To finish my answer, I'll let Leslie do the other parts, is what we will be looking at. We'll be looking at numbers that are turning up and performance. Are we seeing those in minor injuries regularly getting disposed of, which is what we call when we finish the transaction in 4 hours. But in truth, is our performance worsening from what it is at the moment, which is 2 hours? We will also be looking at our major ED performance as well, and also to see what happens to those staff. We don't want those staff to feel as if their chess pieces have been moved around the board. We want them to feel part of the team. We want them to thrive and to develop, and we will also be looking at what happens to those staff. Looking at it in 3 months is actually probably the wrong time to do that, because that puts us right into the midst of winter. If we're looking at it in April, which is when we do our business planning anyway, that is the perfect time for us to do that. And we're not wedded to a single unit. We're wedded to the most economy that we can get, understanding the patient needs that we have.
I think that was very well put, by the way, but I think there is something that says the inequality of provision isn't just in general practice, it's in the way that we provide our acute services at the moment. And our sickest patients actually don't get the service that we want, and we want to concentrate effort where we can match the resource, if you like, between the urgent care or the minor injury work and indeed our sickest patients, so that you can, these staff are used to looking after both sets of those patients. You have to be able to use the resource as best as you can. And actually, in terms of addressing inequalities, we know, and you've mentioned some of them, that some of our most deprived populations do not get the service that we would want them to get. So there's all of that, as well as the fact that some patients may well come to Hillingdon from Mount Vernon. We also know that Ealing, Northwick, West Hart, all of those areas, but the Berkshire hospitals as well, we've spoken to all of those teams. So it isn't that we've just thought about Hillingdon. I think that was a feeling that was being described. That's not true. We have spoken to all of those ICBs, to those hospitals. The piece of work that, and just to go back to your comment, actually, this was something that was put in front of the board. The board is in public, so the board of North West London, so the board in common, is in public, and we certainly got a couple of questions about it there. That's where the decision was taken in July. Can
I just make a second point, which is, Councillor Martin, you made a point about was a decision already made, and it genuinely wasn't. When we do business planning for each year, which looks at our performance and our money, this is presented by our teams who deliver the services, for them to understand their issues and for them to come up with solutions. And they come up with more solutions than we actually take forward. And we've got a number of quite big ticket items that we took quite forward in our discussion phase, but then pulled away from. So I won't go through them here, but this was only one of 2 or 3 that we actually took forward in the end. So a lot of them get internal looking at, and then the externality comes from Health Watch that we engage, but also with our board as well. So I don't want anybody to think that we were hell-bent on closing this and moving it across. It was a suggestion that we thought had a lot of merit to it and took it forward in that way.
I'll have one more, sorry. I heard the comment you made about not support from the population. These things are tricky. So do the population directly affected, are they keen on it, and have they been well mobilised? Actually, yes. But Hillingdon has a much bigger population than the population that is served by Mount Vernon. So we could say who votes for something or who says nothing, and unfortunately, if you agree with something or you're not affected, that your likelihood of standing up and saying, well, I would vote for the closure of Mount Vernon is probably nil. So I'm not asking to agree with it, but there is probably a balance in that discussion.
Councillor Martin, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, just to do with the workforce gap, because you're hopeful, I assume, from your consultations which start this week, that I think it's 9 full-time staff will move to Hillingdon to relieve the bank costs and pressures that you have at Hillingdon. Do you have any indication of whether those 9 staff are particularly interested in moving to Hillingdon Hospital to work in a different environment which they currently have, or is that just an assumption or a hope that they will move down?
The process. So there's a consultation process, as there always is when you're asking staff to do something. And by the way, we do this all the time. You know, you would expect us to move staff from one ward that's really overwhelmed to all of those things happen all the time. So, look, would those staff prefer to stay where they are? Yeah, they would. And the ask is, sometimes this is about patients and putting the patients first and making a decision around that. Will they all move? I hope they do. Will some of them move? Definitely. May others make a different decision? To a certain extent, that is absolutely in their gift. It absolutely is, and rightly so. But we would want those staff to come to where the biggest patient need is. That's what we would want, and those are the discussions that are taking place in them. And those in the main have been given the context I've just said, that people would prefer no change at all. They absolutely understand the reason why. And we will do everything we can to encourage them to move their work to Hillingdon. They've all worked there before, by the way. But in the end, we will see, actually, and we will see at the end of the month who does move.
Thank you. Councillor Chamdal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Looking at Appendix 7, it talks about stakeholder engagement. My question to you is, have you carried out a formal consultation? Because the engagements there are from some resident associations, primarily from David Simmons, the MP, where he's actually done the campaign and he's raised the 12,000 signatories. So, have we done a formal consultation? If so, and that's with residents and staff, what was the outcome? If we haven't, why not?
Thank you. So I think you know the answer, which is no, we haven't. And we've taken a lot of advice about this. So we have done the piece of work that engages with residents, with with our colleagues, our executive colleagues as well, and with all the surrounding boroughs, as we've talked about. It was felt, and you will have seen the adjournment debate, that was enough. In terms of the process for staff, it is slightly different. We do have to go through a formal process to move staff. But I think we've described the engagement that has taken place.
And just to be clear, that wasn't a decision that was made by us. So we speak to the ICB, so it's the Integrated Care Board, and we take advice from them.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Chamdal?
Yes, please, Chair. So the Appendix 7 doesn't then really give me enough meat on the bones of what the outcomes were with the consultation with the various groups. I would have preferred a formal consultation where I could see some figures and percentages to say who's for it, who's against it, or where can we come to a happy medium. This doesn't give me enough meat on the bones. Do you have any more information that you could give us?
Well, we haven't consulted, So what we've given is all of the information that we have. As you said, David Simmons has raised 12,000 signatures. He also got in a German debate. There are many tens of thousands of patients and residents of Hillingdon. So Hillingdon is much bigger than that. And those are the sorts of things we took into account, and also the Integrated Care Board, who have the formal duty, if they feel necessary, to consult.
Just final through the chair then. Maybe it would be worthwhile considering a consultation then.
We won't.
No.
Won't. Okay.
Councillor Hagger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Sounds like you've really obviously looked into this in great depth. You've been going through all the figures. You've been checking out. I'm going to be a bit naive here because I haven't used Mount Vernon thankfully for quite a while. But I just really want to get down to the patient end, I suppose, if I'm thinking. I can't quite get my head round it at the moment. Obviously, the government in National is to keep as many to keep all the A&Es open, and obviously I know we're talking about minor injuries here. But I know it was used a lot, and I've gone on to actually page 10 on Appendix 1. I know quite a few of the time, a lot of people have used it for their children, so, you know, what we were talking about, sprains, there might not be, but the school has sent them up to Mount Vernon, or you've booked in online, which is what I think you do it now, isn't it? You email in as well as 111. And there, obviously, they had all the X-ray machines, they've got scans up there, haven't they, like scanners and that in there. I think logistically I just couldn't quite understand that. I mean, you know, if I've had my children, I've taken them up to Mount Vernon when I've needed to. I wouldn't really have wanted to take them to Hillingdon. I would have found that quite a bit too much. So what I'm getting at really, quite understand how that would happen. Is there going to be a separate unit for the minor injuries? So say if you had a child, say I've got my child, she's 7, she's done netball, she's, you know, put her fingers back. Have I got to go all the way to Hillingdon? Is it a separate area? Can my kids sit apart from those that are in critical or urgent? And I know this might sound really silly, but I'm going to ask it. Are you moving the X-ray machines over there and the scanners over there? So we've got extra equipment. I'm sure you've been through all this, but
no, it's a good.
Thank you.
It's a good question. So, in regards to equipment, we may move it across. So there is equipment across at Hillingdon Hospital, of course. The experience, particularly for say your children, would be we have in what we call our emergency department lots of different zones to it. The one that would be important for you to know is there is a paediatric ED which is completely separate, as a separate waiting area as well. And as soon as you come to our front door or you're directed to our front door, that is the area that you go to, and it's all secured and locked, staffed by paediatric only staff, and there's a waiting area within that, and that sees both urgent and minor illnesses as well for paediatrics. If, for instance, you unfortunately sprained your ankle and you went, yes, you would go for musculoskeletal injuries, by and large, needing an X-ray, or we suspect you need an X-ray, you would go to Hillingdon Hospital. And they change a lot, EDs, from certainly when I started working to actually a couple of years ago. We divert as soon as you come to the front door, whether you've come under your own steam or whether 111 have directed you, you will be moved into a separate area if you've got a very minor injury, so you're going to the urgent treatment centre. If you go the other direction, that's when the critically ill people will be, and that will be in the main emergency department. And of course, people are concerned. It's a nice environment up in Mount Vernon. I'm very familiar with it, and people are concerned that sometimes an emergency department has a certain reputation, and it takes the whole of society. We spend a lot of time and a lot of the staff's efforts to, one, make sure that it's a reputable place to be, and we're not putting people who are having difficulties in social and alcohol difficulties next to people with minor injuries. We don't always get that right, but it's quite easy to move the sprains away from there.
The other thing that I think it might be worth thinking about is when we did the meeting the other day in the chapel at Mount Vernon with the MPs, with the resident association, the neighbourhood team and the ICB came along as well, and talked about the new centres, and actually the fact that they would be having X-ray machines and X-ray cards. So they're building up that service, I think was really helpful. And it may be worth considering whether the ICB came and presented that work here.
Yeah,
actually,
I would definitely advise that.
It's a piece of joint work, actually, with our local authority colleagues.
We have had presentations on that work, and we do think it is really, fundamentally important work. But I mean, do you have a follow up on it?
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to follow up on that is, so if a child's brains are injured, if it had happened to be at Mount Vernon, you go in, you have the X-ray, and they would then go back, wouldn't they, to Mount Vernon, to the physio department that's there, right, to have their sessions of physio. So what will happen with Hillingdon? Would they then have to go to Hillingdon to have the physio, or would they go back to Mount? I wasn't sure whether the physio Mount Vernon would still be open. Yes. I know these are a bit, but I think that's what most people are asking and wanting to know, where it's going to happen and how it all happens. Thank you.
So those follow-up clinics and the physio remain. So
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of, because we went to see the hubs in Ruislip Manor, and at that time they were talking about the kind of the minor injuries care that they would like have the ambition to take on. So in the kind of closure of our minor injuries unit at Mount Vernon, I just want to understand the speed and how you're working with the hubs and the ICB, because there's going to be a gap in provision, and I just want to kind of understand that timeline and how that is going to be communicated with residents or with service providers, and how those hubs or the GPs or whoever it is and us as a council can communicate that, because it may be a month or 2 months or 6 months or a year or whatever, but we need to have that timeline in place as well.
Yeah, if I may start, if that's possible. Not to be semantic, we're moving the service, we're not closing it, the staff are moving with it. By doing that, we want to retain the fact that injuries that require an X-ray will always be going to Hillingdon Hospital. What will happen over the next couple of months is, where we've got used to sending minor illnesses to Mount Vernon, that would have to be accommodated within the general practice offering already, of which there is sufficient, so it will go to there. The things that I'm thinking, to give you a bit of flavour of it, I would imagine that if you phoned up 111 today and talked about a urinary tract infection, really they should be directing you towards pharmacy, towards your GP, but very occasionally they direct you to Mount Vernon, and really that is not the right place for you. I think without that, in the future we'll be directing you to back to the pharmacy, back to your GP, and maybe even the hub. Another example would be wound management. We see about 5 wounds per day, not wounds as in I cut myself gardening, things like post-operative wounds or chronic ulcers. These are not things that should be in minor injuries units. It's things that we've habituated over time, and these are the things that should be, again, maybe not in pharmacy, although some pharmacists do deal with them, but definitely in general practice, because as you know, there's a lot more practice nurses and enhanced practitioners there. In time, the hubs will build up, and the hubs are to be more of a centre of urgent care, and that tiny little bit more of extra things that you get. And sometimes that might be diagnostics like blood tests or ultrasound. But in, say, a couple of months' time, I would expect the twisted ankles to go to Hillingdon, the urinary infections to go to the GP. Might not be your GP, might be the same day urgent care, one of which is being run here tonight. That's what I expect to happen.
If I could just ask another question, please. In terms of the redeployment of staff to Hillingdon Hospital, and you talked about the increase of capacity in the urgent care unit or in ED, what's what is the anticipated kind of percentage growth in terms of that capacity that you are expecting at Hillingdon Hospital? Because I think that is something that, you know, people would want to know, is that we're not going to go to a hospital which is then we're going to wait in the waiting room. I know you talked about waiting times earlier on, but I just kind of want, what's the expected capacity growth that you're expecting from the redeployment staff?
So when we move across, we're expecting about 30 patients per day to go across to Hillingdon in the first instance. And I think that will decrease over time once the hub's more established in the community. And to answer the further question, which is physical capacity, yes, we have that. And of course, with the nurses coming with and being able to see more patients, we would expect the productivity to go up and the patients to be seen in the same time. And just to reiterate, by and large, if you're seen at Mount Vernon, you'll have called up the day before and got that appointment. Now you will go on the same day to Hillingdon. It's semantics, but just so you're clear.
So I'm going to ask the final question, and then Leslie and Alan, you can leave if you want to as well. Thank you for coming to see us. So obviously, I understand Hillingdon Hospital Board made a decision based on Hillingdon Hospital and the whole population that it serves, mainly in Hillingdon. We're talking about about 27,000 people who signed a signature and are worried about how it's going to affect them. And I do have some questions in terms of, with the rebuild that is going to happen, very hopefully is going to happen, you know, Hillingdon Hospital isn't a great place to be moving stuff to. I'd have thought also the hubs, which we're big fans on, have investigated, isn't up there yet, and certainly the communications in the NHS is something we come across all the time, bad signposting. And so I sort of worry, well, not worry, but ideally would now be the right time to do this, or would it be in the future when things are up and running, or after the rebuilds happen. But I think obviously the finances are important, and I do understand that. And I think, is it right? Was it £1 million a year would be saved? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how much of that money is going to be reinvested in sorting out some of those local issues that I talked about, trying to maybe improve the local services so people can get local treatment rather than having to go to... I mean, is part of the plan to invest some of the money in those services, or is it just going to go back into the Hillingdon pot and go out to other probably good places?
Do you want to get...
You start now.
It's tricky working with Alan, is all I'm going to say.
Takes one to know one.
So I think... Look, I think I started off by saying Hillingdon has a long history of not living within its means. And actually, for the first time in the last 10 years, for the last few months, Hillingdon has, its run rate is within its allocation. And so we are trying very hard to do that, but not just do it as we're doing at the moment, which is with using non-recurrent means, but doing that in a recurrent and sustainable way. And I absolutely hear the point you make about is now the right time. I'm going to say this, there is never a right time to do any of these things, quite frankly, because there's always something. The discussion that we've had with our funding body, which is the ICB, and in part the funding that we have together, so some of the Better Care Fund, the pump priming money has gone into the building up of those services to allow that left shift of services in the hubs and in all the things that you have supported. What Hillingdon needs to do is to invest its money, its time, its resources into being able to provide proper ED services for our sickest, also provide well-run services for those minor injury and the minor illness patients that turn up at ED. But we have got a massive piece of work and progress is being made, by the way, but we have a massive piece of work that says our patients in Hillingdon are waiting far too long for their elective surgery, and we need to be investing in doing the things that the acute unit needs to do on behalf of this population, and allow and support, because the acute unit still needs to support the work that is better done by general practice, by our community and mental health colleagues in the community working together in a way actually that Hillingdon should be very proud of. It's not, in the other areas I work, it's not quite as well developed, quite frankly, as it is in Hillingdon in terms of how the community works together outside of the hospital doors. But there's no way that I can be able to say to you is that, oh, we're going to put that £1 million into something else, because that £1 million needs to underpin the rest of the work that acute unit does. That's the honest answer to that.
Thank you very much. Oh, do you want to come in, Alan?
No, I'm going to switch the microphone off. You'll be glad to hear.
So I think we'll close this item for now. If there was time, I was going to ask a question about league tables, but I'll save that to November when we've got the health updates. Microphone. Yes, so, because for those who have not seen, the NHS has published new league tables, almost like a big, massive football league.
Yeah.
Out of 240 hospitals, Hillingdon is 204th, which is plenty of room for improvement. Chelsea and Westminster, though, is it 28th? So obviously that was a good thing for you.
Trial now, but
yeah, it's like we have Jose Mourinho, but he's managing also Cheltenham Town as well as Chelsea, maybe.
But I go back to our ED performance is one of the best in London at the moment, and we're pretty determined to keep that. The elective and the money will get us up that league table, and we will work very hard.
We'll go into that more, I think, when we have our health update in November.
We should just say, is it all right? The timetable is that actually that transfer I think that was what you were asking, will take place at the end of this month. We will look at the impact on that. Our board, by the way, will look at that continuously to see the impact and to see that we manage to be able to maintain our ED performance and take on board any of the feedback that we get from all of our colleagues. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll close that item and feel free to leave if you wish. Thank you. So our next item is, I'm actually going to move the budget item up. Apologies to the people here for autism, but as there are more people here for the budget, I think power of numbers wins. We have quite a big cast list here. So Sandra Taylor, Corporate Director of Adult Social Care, shall I pass over to you and you can conduct who speaks when?
Thank you very much, Chair. I shall conduct. Sounded very grand. I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction to the budget paper for adult social care, and then I'm going to ask finance colleagues to share some information, and then take questions from councillors and my colleagues, which are the assistant directors in adult social care, are here, including Graham over this side, to answer any questions around things like savings targets, etc. So that was my intention, but I wanted to just do some scene setting about adult social care and the financial position that we find ourselves in, which is, and frankly for probably most of the 37 years that I've worked in social care, has always been, which is that it's always challenged, and understanding the demographic growth and the number of people coming into social care is particularly difficult. And that sounds like a bit of a weak argument, but an example of that would be that an individual package of care for somebody could make the difference between, the level of their complexity could make the difference between a break-even month, as Leslie just described, or not, as it were, in terms of our forecasting. So we've been working really hard to try and look at that, but some of the challenges currently, and certainly post-COVID, have been the level of complexity of our residents. So our residents' needs, and if I just explain that in social care, for the last, say, 10 years as a minimum, we've had in the region of just under 3,000 users receiving social care services in adults. And today, and I would say to you the demand is huge, but today I can tell you that floats at around 3,030, and it goes up and down for obvious reasons, which is not massive. That's not a huge difference, and that's actually testament to these guys and the work that they do to maintain people in the community and manage that really, really well. But the cost of care has become extraordinary, and I think the first time that we came and spoke about budget here, I was explaining the way in which the cost of care and the complexity of individuals' needs has changed the landscape entirely. So we're needing to take some really different proactive steps to try and manage what we have. And that means that so I've got a statutory duty and I maintain that, those firm lines around what we have to provide to our residents, and we maintain a good level of service, and we maintain that at a good unit cost value for the council, so providing good services at low cost, and we're managing to hold the line on that, but the demand is relentless, and so the work that we need to do you'll see reflected in some of those savings targets, and you'll equally see that in the demand management and the pressures. And I just before I hand over to others to speak, want to say a little bit about the fact that some of the drivers of those demand pressures in the last 12 months and looking forward are things like the increase in national insurance to employers. Local authorities were funded in part for some of that, but that doesn't count for care providers. Care providers are under enormous pressure because not only has national insurance been increased for those minimum wages been increased, and is going to increase again in April of next year by 4%. And so care providers are using staff at or around minimum wage, have had to put that up, and employers' contribution has gone from 9,500 down to 5,000, so they start paying for those staff sooner. So it's caused in the industry an enormous pressure at a time when, as a local authority and a commissioner, we are pressured not to give huge increases in the cost of care. And I believe that we do our very best to maintain a fair price to our providers. We negotiate hard. Jan is a mean negotiator, I can tell you, but we use brokerage services, and we really negotiate hard to ensure that we're getting best value for the council, for our residents, who of course do make their contributions to their care and sometimes pay in full for their care, and we negotiate hard for them. But it's equally, I respect the fact that it's very hard for care providers at this point in time. So we've taken some pragmatic approaches to how we're managing that, and we can talk about that in the savings target. But for now I'm going to ask finance colleagues if they would like to say something about the budget paper.
Okay. I'm not going to go through all of the detail. But I'd like to draw your attention to two figures in two of the tables, just to amplify what Sandra's said. So in table 2, in the column towards the right-headed variance, you will see near the bottom an overspend at the year end of nearly 5.4 million on adult social care placements. That's what's driving the overspend.
Can I just clarify, is that 5.4 million is projected over the 12 months, or is it 5.4 million as at month 2? Because that's a massive difference in the two things.
Sorry, table 2 is the outturn for 24/5.
So that's a prediction for the whole year?
That was the effect for the whole year.
Yeah.
And that includes the effect of packages that were already in place in April, that started in April, in May, and ones that didn't start until February or March. And the ones that didn't start till February or March or whatever, they have a full year effect when you get into the next year. That pressure was mitigated to an extent by a number of factors, including holding vacancies where that could be done without affecting the quality of service adversely. But when you turn to table, let me get this right, to table 5, which is the one about the month 2 monitoring position, you'll see at the bottom of the variance column, you'll see 8.2 million. So that's what happened in 24/5, plus the full year effect, plus an estimate of what the growth for the rest of this year might be. And obviously the service is working very hard to contain that, but it's a bit premature to declare just how successful they'll be with that at this point. We might be in a better position to report on that at the next meeting. The only other thing I think I want to say is just to put some figures on what Sandra said about the pressures that care providers are facing. The combined effect of the living wage increase last year, which we wouldn't dispute that's a good thing in helping low-paid people, and the effect of the national insurance changes was just shy of 9% on the wage bill for care providers. We're finding, because we're having to negotiate very hard with them, that people with whom we already have service users placed, many of the providers are recognising that the council is just as much under financial pressure that it hasn't been funded for in the funding settlement as they are. But we are also seeing that the full effect of those changes is starting to creep through in some of the costs of new packages of care. So that somebody who wasn't in care before, that's often, not always, but often going to cost more now than it would have done 6 months ago or 12 months ago. And as Sandra said, there's another 4% increase in the living wage coming up. So that pressure is pretty relentless. I think that's all from me, and happy, by all means, ask questions. But I don't know if you want Matt to add anything.
I mean, I only want people to add anything who want to add anything.
I've got nothing to add at this moment.
Okay, cool, excellent. I'm very happy to go to questions if everyone's spoken who wishes to speak. I've got a couple of points and I'll open up to the rest of the committee. My first point is around forecasting. Now, it seems like to me that it's always in the adult social care space, it's forecast that we always have overspend because we haven't forecast that we need to spend as much as we do. Now, I completely understand forecasting is very difficult, but if forecasting was difficult over a 10-year period, let's say, sometimes it'd be too much, sometimes it'd be too less, sometimes it'd be too much, sometimes it always seems like we under-forecast and then we report an overspend. Now, yeah, I mean, how do we do the forecasting, and is it possible to get better at the forecasting in this space? That's my first question. So if you just want to switch your mic on.
Yes, I think it is better. It is possible to get better at forecasting. I think speaking from my experience of having had a previous stint here, I would say that some of the forecasting was optimistic. I think we have got much better at it in terms of having data about the numbers of people in care, what's likely to increase, and about the costs. And we are investing time in modelling that more robustly for next year's budget. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sandra.
Yeah, I think it is important to note that trying to model for adult social care, because of the fluctuating price, has been very difficult. So 2 years ago, a fair cost of care 3 years ago it might be, fair cost of care exercise was brought in, which completely changed the prices of of care and the open market, as a result of which we took the decision to look to purchase our own care home, which we've just done within our own care company, to try and change some of that and manage those costs ourselves. And as a result of all of the work, looking at the pressure, looking at the budgets, looking at the finances of the council and how we can improve all-round good governance, we've started to build a new finance model for adult social care. So the modelling improves. We understand what the demand looks like. We understand where that's being driven from. Off the top of my head, I can tell you, because I look at all of the care packages coming through at the moment, that packages for people with learning disabilities in supported living are one of the highest cost drivers at the moment, and those are young people. So those are young people that have got lives to lead. They need to be as independent as possible. They need to be out doing things. So quite clearly that's a very expensive package of care for a long duration of time, which it's worth the investment. It's a great use of resources to try and drive independence. So those are always going to be the cost drivers, and we've got some graphs that we're working towards to see where those are coming through. You're going to hear a bit about autism a bit later. Autism is also a driver of demand for services at the moment, so we're looking to that. Our older people demand is stable, and that's really because it's so much and we're very used to doing that. So looking at things slightly differently and having that new model in place, I hope to come back to committee on budget monitoring in the next time to say we've got that model and actually it's reaping those rewards. We've seen a little bit of work being done, but we're not ready to report on it yet. So hopefully that's a positive.
That's very useful to know. I mean, for me, certainly, as we move towards the setting of the budget process for next year, I definitely want to get more into that forecasting and how it's done, what it's done, the testing of the numbers, because I feel like, adult social care is always going to be a hard one. I know that, because demand that we must meet is very difficult to predict, but I always feel it seems to be that we're just not as good as we could be on the forecasting, so that's really useful to hear. And my second question before I shut up and the other committee members ask a question is around the benchmarking for best value bit that you mentioned, Sandra. Super important. I mean, how do you know you benchmark for best value? Because obviously I imagine value is quite hard in an area where there's such individual needs. But so how do you know that you are getting good prices for good services?
So there's lots of analytics used and we monitor those closely. The best value out of LGA data, so Local Government Association, everyone reports annually. We submit to ONS to make sure that all of our, and if we complete that data really well, it gives a really good, clear indication, and we perform extremely well in terms of quality and price. In terms of what we pay to other providers, we have to benchmark, so our brokerage service pick that up and look at. So I need to know what Ealing are paying, I need to know what Kensington and Chelsea are paying, but equally I need to know what Bucks are paying, because otherwise we're going to be, we don't want to be driven to pay high prices for care, or low prices for care and low quality. So we've got to try and have that right in the middle and make sure that we've got control of that market. But we do have commissioning arrangements. We work with the WLA across northwest London. So there's a whole host of benchmarking, and I think we could also bring some of that back here in the future.
I would definitely be interested to know more about that, because I think it's important that we have confidence that it's being done that well, so thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Punja.
Thank you, and thank you for the reports, and I really appreciate the huge pressure that social care is under across the country, not just in Hillingdon, so I really do appreciate that. I do have real queries about this report though, because really we are now in period 4, which is about to come to Cabinet, and we are looking at period 2, and we already said by period 4 we're 7.1 million out. So I feel like we are looking at something that happened already, and we're now going into a different space, and we've got quite difficult financial circumstances at the moment. So one of the things that I want to ask clearly is kind of like in this report, what is underlying forecast, first of all, because I don't understand underlying forecast and what it means, and there is no explanation of what these terms actually mean as key guides for us here. And then I really kind of want to understand this, going on from Councillor Denys's point about forecasting and modelling, and I understand what you're saying about a new space, which is the young people in supported living and with learning difficulties, and that is a major cost driver. So in terms of forecasting, where is the analysis that enabled us to have confidence in this report to say that, okay, in budget setting forward, that we know what is being spent here, because ultimately, as elected members, we are legally responsible for budgets that are set, and I just don't have that kind of analysis in these reports, which I was hoping for.
Okay, so two questions. Firstly, the definition of underlying forecast, and then the general point, which I think obviously stands on top of previous figures and ways this might have been done, which led us into a place that we all know about, especially if you watched the last council meeting. But in terms of, are the numbers underneath better than they have been in the past? So who wants to deal with the first point, which is, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'm looking at Table 5 that has the headings to which you refer. The approved budget is obviously, or is the budget that was set at the start of the year. There may be some adjustments if we've had extra grant funding. That budget will change. Against the budget, we have money coming in and money going out, broadly through the bank account, but we accrue where we owe money, and that's the underlying forecast. It's the debits and credits charged against all the cost centres within adults. Sorry. However, there are a number of adjustments that can be made against that. So we may have earmarked reserves that we'd set aside in a previous year that we want to use to fund current year spend. So earmarked reserves are either money going into a reserve or coming out where we've set money aside in the past, or we're setting money aside for future spend and commitments. Provisions, there aren't any in Table 5, but if you think there may be debts that aren't collectible, if you think there may be a challenge, then you make a provision for those. And finally, transformation capitalisation. The government allowed, and I think it was in 2017, to use capital receipts that can ordinarily only be used to fund new capital expenditure or pay debt. If you can come up with a project that will deliver ongoing future savings or stop expenditure rising, we are allowed under the flexible use of capital receipts regime to charge money against capital receipts to deliver those savings programmes. And if you look at the Table 5, the underlying forecast, that's all the pluses and minuses, money coming in, going out, have been adjusted by those three columns to get a forecast outturn, taking those adjustments into account. So we move from 120.7 to 121.4. The difference against 113 million budget is therefore the variance, the 8 million.
So how confident are we that the numbers are sound? And just for context, and I'm sorry I'm jumping all over your question, partly that's because I vice chair the audit committee, by the way, so I have some context on this stuff. But essentially previous budgets were set on what we've discovered to be numbers that were just not consistent or understood or accurate, and so as councillors, when budgets came to us, we agreed them, in a process which is a lot less transparent and good as this process, by the way, and this is the first meeting where we're covering this on a bunch of meetings, so I think that already is going to make the situation better. But I suppose the question that stems from Councillor Punja's question, and obviously after that you can come back and if bits of your question were missed, are we confident on the numbers that you're presenting to us here?
I'm confident in them, that the underlying data.
And why are you confident?
Because we've looked in detail at the amounts that are committed to provide care, effectively built up on a person by person, package by package basis. Now, I will admit that the social care commitment record is dynamic data. Things are being changed and corrected all the time, but the pattern that I'm seeing at the moment is a fairly consistent one. And I can't say that it couldn't be a bit better than this or a bit worse than that, but I see no evidence at the moment to suggest that it's going to rocket out of control. No, that's as confident as I can be professionally.
Thank you. Councillor Plunges, do you want to ask anything else? Or? Yeah, go for it.
So, just kind of recapping just a little bit, because it's quite a lot of information. I appreciate your confidence and thank you very much for that. I would like to say that I would love to see that kind of iterated in the report, because therefore it might kind of solidify some of the questions that we have to ask. Because just even a glossary of what those terms mean would enable us to be able to understand what they are without having to ask questions that just feel tedious and maybe menial in comparison. So that would be really helpful. In going to talking about debt collections, is there any kind of report, because there is nothing in here about reporting on income collections versus targets, so that we know how on track, how off track we are on that, because could that add to the variance that you're talking about? Because at this moment the variance is talking about being 7.1 million in gross, I believe, at P4 from the Cabinet report that we're going to be seeing in 2 days' time. So I'm just kind of looking at those figures, and then on table 5 you've got two extremely large figures of movement, which is 5.6 million and 3.16 million, and for me an explanation of that would be really, really helpful, because I don't kind of understand that they're really large numbers.
I entirely take your point about making what this means clearer, and I look at this and think, yes, we could easily do that. Both the 5.6 million and the 3.2 million both relate to adult social care placements. I think I'm right in saying that the 5.6 was intended to be covered by reserves or contingency. I think that's correct.
Sorry, ultimately contingency that the council built into the budget. You may remember when we set the budget, we had a 10.5 million contingency.
Just for clarification, so a contingency is not a reserve, because a contingency is extra that you pretty sure you must spend, so it's not the same as reserves, which is money in the bank to spend on stuff beyond that. Is that correct?
A reserve is where you've set money aside in the previous year and it sits on the balance sheet as a reserve. A contingency is a current year spend where you think things will happen and I will need to use that in-year budget.
And the 3.2 is the combined effect of extra costs that arose in 24/5 between the setting of the budget and the end of the year, plus the estimate of what further growth in this year could be. And I'd say the estimate of what further growth in the year could be is the bit that might change.
Councillor Punjab, I'm going to go to Councillor Martin who wants to ask a question, and then if you want to ask a couple more after that, you can come back. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. It's a slightly less technical question, I hope, if I can articulate it. You talk a lot about post-COVID and the rise of adult social care needs in the borough, and I'm just curious of what was it about COVID? What sort of things do people need? Is there ever a chance we can move beyond saying COVID pushed it through the roof? And we have an open purse policy in basic terms of if you require adult social care, it's provided in some context. Is the same push to exit the social care system available, or do people just languish within it, which obviously increases costs year on year, where nobody ever leaves the social care help? And can we push people maybe into what we would class as if we can use the phrase, a normal societal living, if that makes sense?
Great question. The absolute ethos of adult social care, probably in any social care department, but certainly in Hillingdon, because we invest so heavily in early intervention, and that actually is about the reasons that our numbers haven't gone like this. You're right to query the COVID. It's almost, so how long are we going to say that for? Point. But actually, we are seeing a flattening, certainly in older people, of that demand. What we're not seeing that is in people with learning disabilities and people with mental ill health. So we're seeing that rise at the moment. So those are the things we've kind of really got to get under the skin of. The reason post-COVID, a lot of elective surgery was not done. So no hips, no operations, no good health management by the NHS, who were then funded for a post-COVID elective surgery round. So we picked up for the last 18 months, 2 years, everyone that's had their surgery, but they're about 3 years after they should have had a new hip, so they're taking longer to recover. We've got a fantastic reopenment service and are in the community care services, which I think is above 90, but these guys will tell me different, above 90% of AIM achieved outcomes. So people come out of hospital, they get that social care input, they get the support, they get up to 6 weeks of support in the community, and they achieve their aims, which is back to their baseline. They're looking after themselves. So that's our older adults and the adult, working age adult population. So the younger people coming through with learning disabilities, our ethos has always got to be, do what you can for yourself, let's help you to help yourself, always look to supported employment, always look to people exiting the service, how can people manage? And we've got a whole range of services. If I give an example of mental health, before people come into services, they will have a whole range of access to third sector community services. Once they're in, perhaps they've had an inpatient stay in hospital, when they're discharged, we would look to not go to residential care, we would always look to supported living, then we'd look to floating support and individual independent tenancy. So I hope no one languishes in adult social care, and if anyone finds anyone that is, let me know, because for a whole host of reasons, one, for best practice and for people's quality of life, but equally we can't afford to give people support they don't need. We need people to help themselves, and we've got to work on, as a council, not just adult social care, because we can't do it individually, but through public health, through adult social care, through housing, building resilient communities. And so you'll see stuff in libraries and all sorts of other places where we're building resilient communities, preventing falls, preventing people from needing because if they go in hospital, so Leslie wants me to stop them from going into A&E, but I don't want them to go there either, because we then have to discharge people into the community and provide that level of support. So it's really important that we do as much prevention work as we can possibly do to stop that from happening in the first place. And when someone's in, promoting independence is absolutely the priority. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
thank you.
Any more questions before I shut the item down? Okay, Councillor Punja, if you could just stick it to a couple. We are coming, this is going to be a consistent item.
I know, but it's in a critical state.
We are, but, well, and also then Councillor Bells, and then, yeah.
I just want to understand on table 3, the blue banking. I appreciate that, you know, we're here to talk about this budget monitoring, and so I'm going to stay away from services and actually look at budget monitoring. It says blue is banked, and you've got 1.2 million banked. Basically, everything was banked, which is pretty remarkable, but usually nigh on impossible for any organisation. So an explanation of how that was achieved, what that means, and was that stuff rolled over from the previous year into that year? Because I just want to kind of see where that takes us into 25, 26, and then 26, 27 in terms of the blue RAG rating that we've got there from table 3, and then looking at table, 5, I believe it is, in terms of, table 6, in terms of what is allocated there. Which is 825,000, I believe. So I just kind of want to understand how that 100% of that is pretty much, nearly 100% has been banked. Of an outturn year.
Whoever feels like they can answer a question, please answer the question.
Just in terms of the bank savings for last year, so actually we start the year with a budget reduction for those savings, so that's how they were delivered, with that budget reduction. With the exception actually of the telecare and community grants pieces, so those are pieces of work specifically through the year to deliver those savings. So the care diagnostics was a piece of work that we brought in a tool to change the way in which we assess people's needs and ensure that their care package can be reduced as an understanding of their rehab and how they've improved.
I didn't switch my microphone off, apologies. But sorry, could you explain to me what you mean by budget reduction? You start the year off with budget reduction.
I have to put my glasses on to see, sorry. So in terms of mental health COVID recovery strategy, reducing the budget at the start of the year by that 500,000, so that we know that actually, so we have a set budget, we take that so we know it's going to be delivered. That was actually a strategy to reduce down to ensure that we actually delivered that saving. We came in with that and ensured that we undertook the work. So it was a decision for us to kind of tackle that COVID strategy. Does that make sense?
Okay, Councillor Bells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank the officers for the explanations, because when I first looked at this, I thought I'm just looking at a balance sheet, and there's no explanation to anything like that behind them, and I did find it difficult to follow, to be honest with you. And I think your explanations have helped, and I think in the future, if we have a bit more behind the figures.
Can I just, before you ask your other question, can I build on that idea and something that's come to my mind? So we're going to be having this in November next, and I think what would be really good is from fellow council members on the committee, if in the next couple of weeks you can email, between all of us actually, what you'd like to see from this report, what you couldn't really understand and how this report could be better, because it's the first time we sort of had it in this state. And I think, yes, you're right, a lot of questions are about those sort of things. So if we can collect that ourselves and feed it back to officers, maybe some of that stuff can be dealt with. So just because obviously Councillor Punja and others who've asked questions, I think that's definitely come up. So yeah, if between ourselves we can come up with sort of ways that this can be improved for us. So sorry, Councillor Bursley, if you want to go into asking your main question.
Yep. it's only a minor one, really. It's on table 6. Just the two amber ones, amber A1 and amber A2, or amber A1 and amber 2. What is the difference between the two of them? Can you explain?
Amber 1, Councillor, is effectively that there is a degree of risk to the delivery of that saving, in part or in full. Amber 2 is that there is a higher risk, or a more significant risk. And the aim is obviously to move as many of the amber ones to the left on that table so that they are actually being delivered, but we'd have to recognise that anything in the amber 2 column presents more of a risk, more of a challenge.
Councillor Bells, do you want to follow up on that?
No, I think that's
good. Okay, thanks. I think so. This is the beginning, basically, of a process for all of us. And again, obviously, from my experience on audit committee, I understand that this is for all of us. This is sort of a very good, important step in a cultural step for the organisation to be sort of looking at the budget and scrutinising it in this way. So I think we, as councillors on this committee, are going to go away and think about, over email, I imagine, how we think this can be improved to help us understand things better, and then we'll feed that back in time. Hopefully it can be incorporated for when you come and present to us again. It's in November. But thank you very much for coming to present to us on this. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again. Okay, excellent. We move on to autism. Gary, is that you? And people can leave if they wish to. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Yeah, of course, of course.
So, thank you, Chair. With your permission, I'll just do a brief introduction, and my colleagues may expound on other aspects of the report. What we've sought to do with this report, so we're mindful it is some time since this area of need actually came to the committee. So we've actually gone into some detail at the early part of the report around definitions, prevalence, so the issues faced by autistic people, and setting out the benefits of diagnosis. So it's all actually intended to be of assistance to the committee, and I hope the committee have found that information useful. What you can see also in the report is some of the developments and achievements over the last 3 years, and that's against the background of increased demand, which Sandra was referring to a moment ago, and my colleagues will probably expand on that. My suggestion, Chair, is that we come back to the committee in the future with the draft strategy, to consult with the committee on its content, if that's acceptable to the committee.
I think so. Yeah, we're all nodding. So yes.
Thanks, Chair. And on that point, Chair, if my colleagues would actually want to expand on other aspects of the report.
Yep. Certainly. Just wanted to highlight a couple of points, really, because as Gary said, it's been 3 years, I think, since we were last here talking about the autism work across Hillingdon, across our partnerships. So I just wanted to highlight a few bits, really, linking into some of the things that Sandra's been saying, and we said in our last item about increase in demographics. Autism for people who don't have a associated learning disability have increased massively in the last 3, 4, 5 years, and there's a range of reasons for that. I think part of that is in relation to, it's probably a slight COVID knock-on around people being at home for long periods of time and developing awareness and situations for themselves that they hadn't been aware of before because of the unusual circumstances of the COVID pandemic and people were living, and also within Hillingdon itself. In the last 3 years, we've seen a significant increase in diagnostic activity from health for people who identify themselves as being autistic and then having ongoing assessments. So just to point out chart 2, this relates to the number of people who are actually in receipt of packages of care. So this links into some of our increased costs and our increased activity around the demographics. And as you can see, back in 2019, we only had 18 people who had an autism diagnosis without an associated learning disability that were in receipt of services. And as of last month, that is now at 374. So a massive, massive increase. And this doesn't reflect the number and volume of referrals that are coming through, whereby we very successfully signpost people onto other services and offer guidance, short pieces of intervention work which prevent the need for them receiving services. Quite a lot of these services and packages are quite small, but not all of them, and we do endeavour to work quite hard to move people on from that. So although these numbers are increasing, there'll be other people within this cohort that aren't featuring here now because they've moved from services. So I think it's quite a significant dynamic. Within adult social care, we have had a restructure, and we now have a very, very, very small service. It's actually one person, but we've now moved to a specialist autism team alongside our PFA team, which focuses particularly on the needs of those people with autism without an associated learning disability. Prior to that this year, if you had autism as a diagnosis and wanted services, you were actually part of the learning disability service. And there's a whole range of connotations and challenges for people around that. So I think it's been a real achievement to be able to achieve some of those real changes, and that's been on board with that. Since 2021, at the time I arrived actually here in Hillingdon, there was a newly established Autism Partnership Board. It was really new, and over this period of time, over the last 4 years, it's developed significantly. At the end of last year, we moved into an all-age autism board. That is a really significant piece of work. It's a quarterly board. It focuses on autism-only issues for people across the board with any level of autism. We have an expert reference group that are participative in that meeting and contribute fully. And I think we've made some real achievements there. Moving to the all-age model will tie in with the development of our autism strategy. I could go on to other bits and pieces, but I think that probably covers most of the key points. And Sonal, if you want to add anything from a children's and education point of view.
Just to say, I think to follow up with what Sandra said, our post-16 team is working really hard with those young people with education and healthcare plans to for them to go into supported internships where they come out with employability skills so that they are able to look after themselves and be a part of their community as we would want for all our young people. So that's something that we're really working hard on, and the numbers are increasing, and you'll see that in the report.
Before I ask for committee members to put themselves forward to ask questions, I just want to say thank you for the report and thank you for all the work you're doing in this area. And just a little detail, but I do appreciate the case studies at the back because it helps make it all very, very real. So I'm going to let other councillor members ask for questions first if you've got any. So Councillor Punja.
Thank you so much for this report, first of all, and as always, Gary, I mean, it's full of explanation and detail, which I really, really appreciate. I have got a specific question, just because in terms of the tables, I understand the increase in diagnostics that have happened in Hillingdon. Well, in Hillingdon, so we've now got more people using these care packages. Given the wide spectrum that autism falls under, is there kind of like that breakdown of kind of those that have more acute needs under autism to those that have less, so that we can kind of understand what the borough's actually doing? Because is it people who have maybe lower ends, that diagnostic, the lower ends of autism, because that spectrum is really high, or is it that it's all at the higher end, and is that what we're doing with our kind of supported packages? I just, because it's just a number, 374, without any kind of iteration behind that number.
So if I can just try and explain a little bit more. So of people who are in receipt, so first of all of those people who are 374 are people who have got Care Act eligibility needs. So irrespective of their autism, they've had an assessment and they have needs that have been identified under the legal framework of the Care Act. But within adult social care, we have people with autism in absolutely every sector of our services. So where we've got those identified people, the 384, there will be people who will be identified as having an autism diagnosis without any other key associated comorbidity, if you like. So it would be somebody who doesn't have a learning disability. It might be somebody who doesn't have a predominant mental health need, for example. Many people get diagnosis of autism through having a learning disability and having other types of assessments, and other people through mental health assessments as well. We have an increasing number of people who are referring themselves for assessment. So I think in terms of the spectrum, this number relates purely to people who have got care act eligibility. So some of these people will have fairly profound day-to-day impacts on their life from having autism, others less so, or there might be elements of their life. And then for other people, it would be about them being perhaps, have physical disabilities, but also have autism. We have a number of people with autism in our mental health services who might have more profound needs, and it might be their autism that is a particular factor in terms of their mental health needs, similarly within the LD cohort as well. So the spectrum is across the piece, but this cohort in Table 2 are just those people who don't have that comorbidity of anything else other than autism. Is that okay?
Yeah, do you want to have a follow-up?
Yeah, so therefore, is that table chart 1 where it basically says 4,788, if I took, let's say, 374 out of that figure, would that give me kind of like then people who don't have that the Care Act package, or would, I'm just, trying to...
It would be a combination. So some of those people will have Care Act packages, but their primary support reason might be their learning disability or their mental health. So although we'll capture their autism within our recording in Hillingdon, I think as it says in the report, there isn't a really good definitive way of measuring the number of people in Hillingdon with autism, partly because some people don't get diagnoses or share the diagnoses of other people, and obviously other people present in ways with other issues like mental health, and they may never get an autism diagnosis despite the fact they may have autism. So it's a little bit difficult to pin that down. But those numbers are related to people at GP practices, so not all of them obviously will have access to or have a requirement for adult social care.
Thank you. Councillor Chandel.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Pringer's asked my question to a degree. No, at least we're on the same wavelength. But my mind is I'm still a bit concerned that the numbers are growing, and I still can't understand. I know it's diagnosis, but I still can't get my head around how they've significantly grown so much.
I think there's probably two key factors. I think in Hillingdon, this is just my assumption really, that I understand that prior to sort of 2020 there was little adult diagnostic work being done for adults who identified themselves as possibly having autism and wanting an assessment. The waiting list has gone down massively. The volumes of people being assessed are huge. I think it's fair to say that those people who are assessed through health and have an autism diagnosis, that's really the end of the process with health in most cases. So people are being referred through the local authority in many cases, and I haven't included it because I haven't got the details to hand, but the referral numbers in relation to this increase is massive. It really is massive in terms of that. I think there's a huge amount in the last 4 or 5 years of more self-awareness, that people are much more aware of autism, and people are being diagnosed much earlier, I think, in childhood and in children's services. That's also another big factor that we're seeing. The vast majority of young people coming through to adult social care in transition will have an autism diagnosis probably as part of their needs as well. So I think there's a whole range of different reasons. But there are lots of people in their 50s and 60s who are now being assessed that have been autistic all their lives and now being identified in that way through this diagnostic process.
Would you like a follow-up? I'm going to ask a question. If you want to follow up after I've asked my question, nod. So my question relates to, on page 5, the top bullet point, number of people on waiting lists. and it says there's 1,468 who've had initial assessment and are awaiting a diagnosis. That feels like a lot to me. So, I mean, some context about what that really means would be super useful. But also, as well, I'm really interested to know what support these people get, because we've heard, when we've looked at other things where people have had waiting diagnosis for a long time, potentially they're not getting any support, which doesn't help in the process, especially when it takes a long time. So, yeah, if you can give context to that number, that'd be really appreciated. And are these people getting support?
I believe that number's from health.
It is.
So it's a health number for people waiting for diagnosis, and that number's, I believe, come down. And we do get reported on that number at the Autism Partnership Board on a 6-monthly basis. I am aware that health have a pre-diagnosis service for people who are in acute need. And what I would say as a caveat is that anybody, the autism element, no one requires an autism diagnosis to be able to access an assessment for potential services and support from the local authority. So some of those people might be referred in to the local authority for assessment and support, and we'll definitely have people who we are providing services to that don't have a diagnosis but do have autism. Does that help?
I mean, it helps up to a point, and that's not your fault. It's just the nature of it. I mean, I suppose what I'm concerned about is that those people getting the support they need, and it's a big number, and I assume there's lots of stuff in there, and maybe it's not something you can answer at this moment in time, but I think it'd be really important for us to know, the types of different people maybe under that number, and if those, because what I don't want is basically those people just to be waiting in a dark room for whenever they get their diagnosis, and then situations getting worse and not being dealt with, or all that sort of stuff, which I assume, I hope is not happening, but I would like some understanding of maybe where these people are at and what help they're getting during that process.
Chair, I'd say that there has been funding provided for, I think, 3 third sector organisations to provide support. Yeah. And what we can do is provide the committee with more information about that and the numbers being supported.
That would be really useful to know. So, okay, Councillor Bells.
Thank you. Good report, etc. Just a quick one, really. Do you have a map of the borough where there's autism, where it's more prevalent at all, or do you know at all?
Yes, Councillor Bells. There's some. Well, I say yes. We're in the process of actually doing that at the moment. So. Colleagues working for the performance team are actually doing that, which will enable us to identify exactly where in the borough people with an autism diagnosis are actually living, which will then be able to will enable us to get that picture of whether there are concentrations or not in certain parts of the borough.
Councillor Martin.
Hi, thank you. I may have missed it on here. This is obviously the numbers for adults who've been diagnosed with autism. We can see from 2019 to 2026 the rise in cases, and we can see the same in the chart, table 1. How does it compare with child or younger than 18 diagnosis? Do you see the same statistics, or is it a higher probability for younger people?
I think for those that have got education healthcare plans, something like 26% of young people have got a diagnosis of ASD. That may be with a learning difficulty, and it's right across the spectrum, if you like. So it may be their primary need, it may not be, but about 25 to 26%. Yeah, and it has been rising over the last few years. Again, whether that's a COVID thing or not, I'm not sure. And just to say that research suggests that there hasn't been an increase in the number of people or children with diagnoses, but the number of diagnoses has increased, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question fully.
And if you don't mind, just for some context, so there's 350 people this year of adults who require a social care package. So that would be of varying degrees of support. What would be kind of the lower edge of support that's required by someone versus someone who needs the most support? What sort of variance do you have to give?
Well, the variance could really be from somebody requiring support around their accommodation needs and fairly full-time care would be the absolute extreme. Most of those people would probably have a different associated need alongside their autism. But in terms of small packages of care, maybe a very small package of care of a couple of hours support to help with something really practical that is a real challenge for that individual. That might be something really menial, like supporting them reading their mail or addressing issues that they might have, to a variant thing. We are looking at lots of the support packages being short-term, so actually building skills for this cohort of the 374 that currently get packages. They don't have an associated learning disability. So we're doing a range of different individual pieces of work with people to try and build their skills and confidence in the areas that they're challenged in currently. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, so we've got Councillor Punja, then Councillor Haggard, then Councillor Chamdell, then I'll let you go home. Okay. Councillor Punja.
Thank you. There were 2 bullet points that really kind of caught my eye on this report. One was there is a higher prevalence of autism in males than females, and the other one is there is a higher prevalence amongst Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And I just wondered if there was research or kind of analysis behind why and just kind of like what the research is behind that, and actually how that kind of then correlates to Hillingdon.
I probably can't answer the question fully, but that's a national picture. It's national long-term research. I think research has always been very evident that males, and usually this has been a childhood diagnostic, has been prevalent in males. I think there's ongoing research around, and we don't have data in relation to how that matches with the Hillingdon picture.
Thank you. Do you want to, sorry, Gary, do you want to cover this?
Just to say that the work that I was referring to about actually mapping where people are in the borough, that won't actually enable us to, we wouldn't actually be able to do that by gender and ethnicity. Something we probably might be able to look at in the future, but we wouldn't actually be able to do that immediately for this piece of work.
Go on, follow up, yeah.
So it was just kind of, therefore, if that was the case, how do services enable, how do we target services to those communities, for example, especially a BAME community, or I don't even know, I'm asking maybe a very stupid question here, or does it not matter? But I would assume that it would matter because again, culturally, autism will be treated differently in different minority ethnic groups. So yeah, just kind of in terms of tailoring services as you're developing services, knowing that analysis might be relevant.
So I think it's probably fair to say that we haven't got any kind of key, other than the previous work that Gary spoke about. We're not developing specific services for autism in terms of itself. And although I've given a bit of a focus on the autism-only cases, we have a much larger cohort of people that have autism within the borough, and some of the work that Gary's just talked about will be some ways in which we can move that forward. So actually, depending on the presenting needs, I mean, it's probably one cohort of people is autism where the variance of need is so massive. So there'll be definitely some people that I know we're paying £6,000 or £7,000 a week for a package of support to maintain them in a setting, and others it'd be much less, and that variance is there. For people with autism who might have a mental health need, there could be a whole range of different packages of support that probably focus around the mental health need more than their autism, with that awareness. We certainly haven't got anything sort of majorly specific around the ethnicity issues that you've raised, or even specifically around the gender issues particularly.
Could this be something that maybe you took away and thought about? Because if the national data suggests that is a constant, then obviously we have different concentrations of populations, especially in areas which actually have higher deprivation. So yeah, I mean, if it's something I think we'd like to know more about. So if you could take out that away and think about Gary.
Chair, I mean, it's an obvious gap, so I think it's something that we actually need to consider as part of the strategy development. So we bring that back to a future meeting of the committee.
Thank you very much. Sandra. Yes, sorry, go.
Can I just add to that point that we do have culturally sensitive services that we commission, so we do specifically to address some of those needs. However, what we don't have is the very specific expertise around autism only, and that is the work that we need to do. So others with those complex care packages we're buying in that expertise and that specialism. We have a positive behaviour support team currently, so we've got workers embedded in both adults and children's services who provide that specialist support around how people's responses can be engaged with to understand their communication methods, etc. So there are a range of services, but to now tie those into this strategy is important that we kind of link back on those. And I think if we go to some of the work that we have started, and I'm unashamedly plugging this now while we're in about children's services, but if you look at our family hub services, we have younger children from babies onwards being diagnosed at early stage, but they are then waiting. So they've got, there are early diagnosis and not a full complete picture, and they are waiting to see somebody for a full diagnosis, and the family hubs deliver a waiting well service, and that makes a real difference for families. And what that means is that they can start to work with tailored support to ensure that those young people, those children, so we're talking really about 2 to 5 year olds really, that they're going to go into school knowing that they've had that additional support to make sure that they get to that position to be able to start school and be school ready, knowing that they are awaiting a full diagnosis. So the pathway needs to come, and the work that Gary and the team have been doing is excellent, and you know, it's starting to get into a good position, but we're starting right at the early ages, which is important for everybody to know that we're doing that, because we are receiving children from through that PFA team, Preparation for Adulthood team, from 16 onwards, so we are understanding those children with EHCPs and the types of service we need to commission to make sure that they don't stay in services, that they do become independent adults.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very useful to know, and we look forward to seeing when you look into this where you sort of get to on the strategy. So thank you. So, Councillor Hagger.
Yes, very quick one. Thank you so much for the report. It's really good actually to look back in and see what progress we have made. And years ago we were desperately trying to, we can see the numbers have increased because that's what we were after. We were after trying to actually get autism up and actually, you know, make sure we're not losing anyone through the net. So I think that's actually a really good sign, even though it does produce its challenges, of course. What I just want to ask is with the adults one, I was just a little bit concerned. I mean, obviously I understand that we're getting the assessments done as quick as possible, but on page 6 we have actually got between 18 months to 2 years. That is quite a long time, and I know that's something the Chair brought up as well. And in between that, is that including when we're using the independent sector as well? Is that inclusive of that independent sector?
It is, and to emphasise, Councillor Hagger, which you're probably already aware of, this is something which CNWL are actually responsible for. They are actually getting support from an independent sector.
But that is the adults as well.
The Oxford company is actually supporting with both children and adult assessments.
Okay, and can I just ask a question to follow on with that? I was concerned really with the adult ones, because obviously we know autism can happen at any time. It could even be from an accident or brain injury, and that then caused it. Once the assessment's done, and this is like for an adult, how quickly the service is then brought into play? So in other words, you know, I think that can be quite challenging as well, because sometimes we can see the assessment done and yet they might have to wait before anything's actually interconnected in. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that obviously the assessment, if we're talking about the diagnostic assessment, is done within health, and I don't think, you know, from an individual point of view, that's really kind of the end of that process, and there'll be referrals on then to a range of services. If anybody's referred into adult social care, they'll pretty much be seen fairly quickly. Now we've got the specialist team, those referrals, if someone's got an autism diagnosis, will go straight through to the specialist team. They'll have their Care Act assessment. if they're not meeting eligibility around that, they'll be supported and signposted to a range of services, not least the third sector ones that we've talked about already. And if there's a requirement for a package of care, then that will be implemented as quickly as it would be for anybody else, hopefully as soon as we can, really. So there shouldn't be a huge delay for somebody having a referral to adult social care to receiving a service. It should just be a short period of time following the assessment.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chandel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a, sort of a little bit of a budgetary one as well. So out of the 374, how many already were on a package of care, or are they all new package of cares? Because then my question would be then to Sandra's team is, that would will contribute to your overspend, and that's the sort of figures that we'd like to know, what's contributing to an overspend on a monthly or quarterly basis.
So that 374 are people who have an autism-only diagnosis. So all of those will be new. The original 18 or 19 in 19 might still be the original 18 in that 374, but there probably is going to be a range of different people within that. So it won't be 374 over the last 5 years. It's where we are today with 374 active packages. Perhaps it certainly is increasing because from a national reporting perspective, we report autism as learning disability, even though it's not a learning disability, but we report it in that way from the national perspective. So these numbers show on our learning disability numbers, which, as Sandra said a number of times, has just increased massively. So this cohort probably have overall the least volume in cost of packages of support, but their cost is still high. The whole cohort of people with autism, we do have some very high cost placements and packages of care within relation to that. If I just talk a little bit about the LD world as a whole, just to give a bit of context to some of the things that have been mentioned. So if we go back 20 years, how people with learning disabilities were supported and cared for and treated in health is very different to how they are now. So we have an increasing number of young people with very complex needs coming through at 18, very many of which will have an autism diagnosis as well, who perhaps 20 years ago wouldn't have reached adulthood. Their health needs would have been so significant. In addition to that, we have this increasing number of young people around the age of about 20 who are getting diagnosed with autism, who have perhaps managed in the school environment quite well, but then have actually started to present challenges in adulthood to themselves and to others, which is then we have quite a significant number of new referrals at that age group when young people are finishing education, whether it be college or whatever else, and families are recognising that they can't support in the way that they have done. We have that middle-aged group of people with learning disabilities who historically would have been probably end of life in their 40s and 50s 20, 30 years ago, but aren't now. And actually their carers are getting to an age, they're coming in to quite high cost packages of care because they've lived on a very supported way with family, with a small package of care, so we're seeing huge increases in cost for that cohort. And then the last lot are actually, as I said, longevity for people with learning disability was actually much younger than it is now, and we now have an increasing number of people with learning disability in their 70s, 80s, and we lost a chap this year who was in his 90s, which would be quite unheard of 20, 30 years ago. So our numbers of LD are increasing for all those different reasons, and the needs are increasing at different times in people's lives, which are then increasing the cost of the service. So that's kind of some of the narrative behind some of the challenges.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for talking to us, and we look forward to hearing more. So I'm closing this item, so you're free to leave if you wish, and everyone else is always free to leave whenever they wish. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on to item 8, which is the GP coverage in Hillingdon single meeting review draft final report. In July we had a very long interesting meeting where we talked about GP coverage in Hillingdon, which I think Councillor Martin referenced in terms of what was happening in our first main agenda item. What I propose is, does anybody have any comments or amendments that they wish to make to the report? Then Nikki and I can go away and do that before presenting the Cabinet, or are we happy to accept the report and the recommendations as they are? Yeah, Councillor Budget, microphone on. Yeah, thank you.
It said here in paragraph 4 that out 42 of Hillingdon's 44 GP surgeries have been organised since blah, 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 blah. There are no GP surgeries in Ruislip Manor or Hillingdon West wards. What about Heathrow Villages?
I believe there's actually a surgery in, I think it's Harlington?
So there is. Isn't that the area where people complain most about not having access as well? I think I remember that.
Yeah.
So technically, yes, there is, but that doesn't mean that it's easily accessible for the residents in Heathrow Villages.
That's true. Yep. Okay, so we're happy to accept that and take that forward. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your work on that. Brilliant. Okay, so we're now on to the Cabinet Forward Plan, and my papers have, during this meeting, gone all over the place. Can I borrow that for a second? Okay, thank you. This is how my mind works, by the way. So one of the things I noticed was actually, which I thought would be useful for us to hear about, whether it's, when's our meeting in November?
That will be the 11th.
Yeah, I'm thinking about November actually though, because so on the 20th of November, the Cabinet are going to be considering technology-enabled care plans, and I think this is just an interesting area for us. So I would like officers to come and present to us on that on the 11th of November, if that sounds like a good idea. Yeah? Fantastic. Did I have something else? Does anybody else have anything else on the forward plan? No? All good? Okay, fantastic. So I'll move on to our final item, which is the work programme. I don't have any comments particularly on the work programme. Does anybody have any comments on the work programme? No? Great, okay, I close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.